Chapter 7 – Identification of Antique and Vintage Clothing. The rich history of fashion can be traced and studied through the labels and tags of vintage clothing. These tags provide key insights that can help in accurately dating the vintage garments and understanding their historical context. This chapter focuses on the critical tips and tricks to identify the probable era of a garment based on its labels and tags. 7.1 Importance of labels and tags. Not every vintage piece comes with a label or tag. Clothing made prior to the 1980s was often handmade, so it may lack this identifier. However, when present, these tags can offer significant clues to the clothing's era, its brand, the materials used, and the country of manufacture. Understanding these clues is an exciting aspect of vintage clothing exploration. 7.2 Identifying vintage clothing labels. 7.2.1 Copyright labels. Look for a copyright year on the label. This year, although indicative of the brand or logo's copyright date rather than the garment's production year, can offer an estimate of the vintage garment's era. If the copyright year is 1992 or earlier, the garment is likely vintage. 7.2.2 Made in USA. Labels. Garments labeled, Made in USA, or bearing an American flag design on or near the brand tag typically hail from the 1980s. This detail is important as only a small percent of today's garments are made in the USA. 7.2.3 No zip codes. If a boutique's address on the label doesn't include a zip code, the garment likely predates 1963, the year zip codes were introduced. 7.2.4 Woolmarks. Woolmark logos, first used in 1964, can give clues about the age of a garment. An absence of the logo on a made-from-wool garment suggests that it predates 1939. Variations in the logo design can help to narrow down the production date further. 7.2.5 Material names. Labels indicating unusual material names like Dacron polyester can help date a garment to a specific period. Dacron polyester, for example, suggests a 1958 to 1970 production range. Also, pay attention to vintage names like Celanese, Codal, Vicron, Kiana Nylon, and Orlan. 7.2.6 Countries that no longer exist. A label showing a country or colony that no longer exists is another indication of vintage clothing. For instance, a garment labeled, Made in Yugoslavia, likely predates the early 1990s, when the country split into several separate nations. 7.2.7 Half sizes. Labels featuring half sizes suggest a pre-1970s and no older than 1940s production date. Half sizes, such as 16.5, were introduced in the 1940s for shorter women, and odd numbers denoted junior sizing. 7.2.8 RN numbers. RN numbers, which were first used in 1952, can help date a garment. Numbers listed as 13,670 or larger are post-1959, while those between 00101 to 04086 suggest a 1959 or earlier production date. 7.2.9 Lot numbers. The use of lot numbers on labels ceased around 1979, so a garment with a lot number likely predates this year. 7.2.10 Odd number sizes. Odd number sizes were more commonly used for pre-teen and teenage women of the pre-1980s era. This system ceased to be used around the 1980s with the introduction of separate petite lines. 7.2.11 Made in Mexico. Labels. If a garment label reads, Made in Mexico, it's likely from the 1950s, a period when Mexican styles caught on as a trend in America. 7.2.12 Care instructions. The presence or absence of a care label can also provide dating clues. Garments with at least one care instruction on the tag are likely from 1971 or later. Those without any care instructions typically predate 1971. ### 7.2.13 Union tags. Union tags, particularly from the International Ladies Garment Workers Union, ILGWU, can help identify vintage clothing. These tags were used from the 1920s to the 1980s. ### 7.3 Conclusion. Labels and tags can offer significant insights into a garment's vintage era. However, these should not be used in isolation. It's crucial to examine other aspects such as the garment's construction, style, materials, and other distinctive features to accurately date and determine its historical context. By honing these skills, you can effectively uncover the fascinating stories behind vintage and antique clothing.